my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. And helping me break it all down, I have a very special guest in the building. He is a writer, a poet, and the special assistant to the executive director for the legendary Nuyorican Poets Cafe in New York City. Nicco Diaz, how you feeling, my bro?
Bro, thank you so much for having me to come talk about some very pertinent issues in the Latinx community, nationally, locally. I'm very pleased and excited to be here.
Of course, man. I appreciate you hopping on. I mean, Nuyorican Poets Cafe is legendary, especially, you know, for me, somebody who grew up in and out of New York City. So we'll dive into a bunch of the work that you're doing there. It's very special and important to the culture, to the community. But first, man, I wanna tackle some of these trending stories from this last week. I mean, we have, man, in our own backyard in Brooklyn, we had some drama going on over a street sign that was being removed, and then was quote unquote by mistake it happened, and now it's put back up. So we'll talk about that. It speaks to a bit of the erasure of our culture that tends to happen. We'll also talk about newly elected Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who apparently has a problem with the word LatinX. So we'll talk about that. We're also going to, touch on this dude who's a congressman somehow, some way from New York, George Santos, who has lied about everything that he's ever accomplished in his life. Yet somehow this man has also now been given committee assignments by the Republican Party. We'll get into that nonsense. And then on a positive side of things, I thought it was really interesting to see. So we'll talk about this in our Mi Gente segment. Shakira releasing a diss track against her ex, which is not something we typically see from women, but I think it speaks to this whole empowerment, which is a beautiful thing. So we'll talk a bit about that. But first and foremost, man, let's just talk about this nonsense. We'll do a deep dive in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Sounds good.
Say it louder for the people in the
All right, man. So, you are a New Yorker. I'm somebody who was born and raised in New York when I was younger. I've grown up, living and going in and out of New York for the entirety of my life. It holds a very special place in my heart, particularly when you talk about the long history of Latin culture there, specifically Puerto Rican culture in places like Brooklyn, pre-gentrified Williamsburg, which was a haven for Puerto Rican immigrants. And the beauty of it is, while of course it has changed completely from our parents' generations and our grandparents' generations, there still are remnants of that beautiful culture, that Puerto Rican culture. But as is what typically happens, our culture is the first to be erased. People are looking for an excuse to get rid of, the contributions that we have made to this country and specifically the communities of New York City. As we saw on Graham Avenue in New York City, in Brooklyn, I should say, which is nicknamed Avenue of Puerto Rico. And it's shown a sign. It's a very historic sign for that street. It was then replaced with just Graham Avenue, and they took away the Avenue of the Puerto Rico part of it. Of course, there was a lot of outrage within the community. And then the city claimed that it was mistakenly taken down by the Department of Transportation. Yep, quote unquote, mistakenly. And then it was put back in place after irate Williamsburg residents launched social media campaigns for its restoration, of course.
Yeah.
All right. Obviously, we both have a lot of feelings about this. I think we're both on the same page. I mean, you're hearing this, you're seeing the story just like I am. What was your take when you saw it?
I like, it's so hard, right? Because like the intellectual in me and the activist, the proud Latino, it's super infuriating, right? Like,
yeah,
we fought to name spaces after us, and there's not many named places in New York City that bear Puerto Rican fingerprints, right? In terms of the street signs. And so people fought to and advocated to get that street named. And, when I first went to Williamsburg, when I was working in Brooklyn, like a few years ago, I didn't know that was a historically Puerto Rican neighborhood until I went there and saw the street sign, right? And so that was a reminder for me, somebody who had been denied on purpose or just through assimilation, right? Like understanding of my Puerto Rican heritage in New York City. And I was reminded of that when I went there. And that is the point of these namings of the streets. So all of that is like super fucking, I don't know if we can curse, but
no, yeah, do your thing, go off.
Oh, okay. It's just, it's fucking frustrating, right?
Yeah.
However, as a New Yorker, as a person who has to live the day-to-day kind of rule and grind, it's kind of like, they did that,
right.
A little bit of the desensitization, right? As a person of color in this country, in this space, right? Like, it was just like, like, almost like a resignation. Like, not that I am against, like, not that I wasn't advocating and, in communication and proliferating the message that this needs to be done and that this was done. But in terms of just like my initial gut reaction was like really, really passive, because I was like, damn, and another one bites the dust kind of situation. And I think that I speak for a lot of people when, a lot of people are tired of this kind of stuff and are kind of throwing their hands in the air. It's like, well, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And what was fortunate is that there was enough like blowback from the community on social media that it was quickly changed and they had to clean up their mess. And that's just proof positive that, like, when we make noise, people do listen. Right. And so we can fight the powers that be through collective action, through community organizations. So, that was just a very fraught situation. And it was just a random, I think last week, like Wednesday, Thursday, it was like, it just popped up on my social media feed and on Instagram. And I was like, wow, like this is intense. So, what I think some good things that came out of the situation, right, is like now we're talking about the historical impact that Puerto Ricans have had in Williamsburg, in Bushwick. Like there are still Puerto Ricans there. There are, they're being pushed out for, the trust fund babies and all this kind of situation and gentrification and all its ills. But it is definitely emblematic of the erasure, as you said, that is happening to Latinx communities in New York City, but more broadly the entire country. We were displaced here through Operation Bootstrap. We were brought from Puerto Rico in droves to help fuel the industrial economy, to fuel the wars that were happening, literally. And so when you displace those many people, and we were still able to create thriving communities here in New York, in places like Williamsburg, Bushwick, East Harlem, El Barrio, the South Bronx, all of those places, it speaks to our resiliency as a people. And again, us fighting against that erasure speaks to our resiliency as a people. So we'll always be the proverbial thorn in the side of the United States. And I just think we always need to keep making noise despite how tired we are of this kind of stuff,
Yeah. I think you're hitting on a couple different things. I mean, to your point, I grew up in the Bronx when I was younger. That's where my family was from. So
where in the Bronx?
wasn't in South Bronx, so we're off of Grand Concourse, right in the thick of it all.
Haven, yeah.
Yeah, and I was born on the, the Upper East Side, so, and I had family who grew up in El Barrio, you know what I mean? So for me, that was what I thought of when I thought of Puerto Rico in New York City. And it wasn't until I started working in Brooklyn years ago that I started seeing, like the streets named after, Borinquen Road, Avenue, all these different things, right? And of course, this one being a legendary one as well, Avenue of Puerto Rico. But it is a sense of pride. I can remember when I saw that, it was like, man, like I feel at home, right? It made me feel acceptance. It made me feel that, I belonged somewhere, right? And that's what's important, especially in a country that loves to, like you said, we are the thorn in their side. They love to make us feel like we are the outsiders here and we should just be happy because we get to, participate, in the everyday life of Americans. And, there's a couple different things. I mean, because like you said, there is a part of me that was just kind of like, this is just people doing what they do in this country, and I'm saddened by the fact that I would even take such a, sort of, I don't know, lethargic mentality towards something like this. But, it is just the way things go for us, right? I've always been like recently asking the questions of like, man, like, where were we during the civil rights movement? Where were we during all of these different places? Because that wasn't taught to us in school, right? Again, we were there. We existed in these places. Organizations like the Young Lords existed and worked alongside of the Black Panthers, but our history has been erased. We haven't made it into the history books. We're not spoken about. We're not taught about in most school systems, right? And that's by design. And then, the other thing I kind of, as you were talking, sort of came to my mind was like the irony that we live in a country where Confederate statues still exist, all over this country. And these people were literally treasonous traitors. And people are fighting to have those things stay up. Yet somehow they're like so quick to take down our things without even like polling the local residents, essentially, right? And with no consideration to what the backlash might be or who they're hurting in the process. And it's just a really ironic, sort of example of this country. And also, Williamsburg and those areas are so gentrified, and it's kind of speaks to the idea that anything referenced by a person of color automatically lessens the value of that area, sort of. You know what I mean? Like, because you can't help but they claim it's a mistake, but really, why else are you doing that, right? You're trying to erase that history because you feel like we sort of cheapen the new value that it has, right? There's no other real way around it. I'm not jumping to conclusions here. That's the only logical explanation for why you would go out of your way, spend tax dollars to get a new sign, and spend tax dollars to pay somebody to have to come and take this down. That would be the only reason why you're doing this, is that we are viewed as lesser than, and any association we have now with an up and coming or now at this point, a high income neighborhood cheapens the value for its new residents.
Yeah, there's a quote that I live by from Jordan Peterson. It's if you're silent while you endure pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. And there is something to be said, whether I think it was intentional, right? Like you don't do things like what you said, regardless of like the response, the consequences of their actions. Their actions were intentional to change the name because of a deemed a lack of value in the current street sign as it existed, whether because it was in a language that was not the language of power in this country, because it represented a culture that has been subjugated as a colony for years over years, whether they didn't think people would care, right? And that was a false assumption. It just, we got to make noise. We got to, really reclaim our history, right? And put it out there. And so, yeah, it's definitely, again, a testament that like we can't make noise, we can't do it, but we need to protect that which is named after us, that represents our culture, and also expand like, what it is. What the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, the street is named after one of our founders, Pedro Pietri, El Reverendo. And whenever I'm on that street, I turn the corner of Avenue B, and I'm like, we here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's important to make hollow ground for our people and demonstrate that impact through the street signs. Because you're right, those monuments, those are just straight up monuments to white supremacy, And that's why we need to do the work to take them down, because, historically, like they represent so much of the most rotten, vile, evil institutions that our country, original sins that our country was founded upon. And like, we gotta retroactively work to get that dismantled, but installing now the counter narratives that our country has tried so hard to tamper down, right? In our textbooks and all of that. So yeah, man, the work is just beginning, but kudos to the organizers who got that street sign put back. And what's crazy is like, I'm like, well, the next one, we need to be more organized
Right.
because it's going to happen again. And
Sure.
I like just know that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and to your point, the last thing I'll say on it is yeah, we have to be better at organizing. We have to take action, right? Because if there's one thing that we can look at is like you have to look at, you know, our Black brothers and sisters and the way that they have fought back to make sure that their history is being shared, right? That, you know, their voices are still being heard, you know, and it's extremely powerful to see that. And I feel like, unfortunately, you know, Latinos as a whole, and you know, specifically we're talking about Puerto Ricans here from New York City, but you know, we haven't been great at organizing and making sure that we're fighting to have our voices heard collectively, right? And that's something we have to be, you know, a lot better at. We can't just be happy to be here. We have to fight back and understand that like there's power in people knowing where we came from and our contributions and having actual real power, you know, within our communities is incredibly important. So that's something that I love that you brought up, that idea of really organizing and being ready for the next one, right? Because there will be a next one, as history tells us. Now, moving on to another story here that kind of left me scratching my head. I've seen mixed comments from the Latin community as a whole, but you had newly elected Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You know, her first day as governor of Arkansas signs a series of executive orders. Among these executive orders that were so pressing she had to do on her first day in office was banning the word Latinx from all government buildings. According to this executive order, they say banning Latinx from government buildings is an attempt to, quote, respect the Latino community by eliminating culturally insensitive words from official use in government, end quote. Sanders characterizes the word Latinx as, quote, ethically insensitive and pejorative. And they go on to say that, you know, the order comes from Pew Research that only 3% of American Latinos and Hispanics use the word Latinx to describe themselves. Also citing the Real Academia Española, a Madrid-based institution which governs the Spanish language as a whole. Many people are also sort of saying the underlying meaning behind this or reason behind this is because it's actually an attack on the LGBTQ plus community, because this is a non-binary word, you know, and that this is just, you know, they're claiming it's for the Latin community to show them respect, but the reality is it's more of the Republican agenda of targeting the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, our community is so torn on the word Latinx, and some people are so, you know, I don't know, offended by it. But what's kind of your take up on the word Latinx, and then I guess this topic as a whole with the government?
Yeah. Oh well. Kudos to Sarah Huckabee, I guess, for, you know, furthering the Republican agenda of like taking these like low hanging fruit culture wars,
right,
and putting your name out there. Like she was able to like Latinx and LGBT, like she angered enough people with like, and this is something so frivolous, right?
Yes.
I mean, I first discovered the term Latinx a few years ago because when I was in college, it was Latino, Latina, right, and that conforms to the very gendered language of Spanish, and it was an attempt to replace Hispanic, which was a term in the 60s and 70s ascribed to folks who spoke Spanish and were from that, and includes Spaniards, but doesn't include Brazilians and Haitians and all of that. So, you know, it was an attempt to get closer to a source, a truth, an identifier, right? And then Latinx was an attempt to make it gender neutral, because Latino, Latina subscribes to the gender binary, and there are folks who are there's a form of erasure when you only have those two, because there are people of many different gender expressions involved in that. But then the Spanish speakers rejected it because they're like, well, this is the English language doing what it does and corrupting the Spanish language. And so we're going to do a gender neutral version. It should be Latine, right? Like neither A or O, it's it. And so it's a very divisive issue, because it's not popular, right? Like 3% of the folks surveyed are not use that word. However, just because 3% of people use that word to define themselves with, doesn't mean it's culturally insensitive to use that word.
Right.
And I think there's a bit of, like, again, that rhetoric of twisting statistics to conform to the will of politicians and to promote sort of these agenda. And all of that is just like, I'm like, it's so obvious. It's a little like, to me, it seems cheap as a political move. But that's what they do, the Republicans. My thoughts specifically, I use Latinx because honestly, like, any word with an X in it, I'm down with. Like, I grew up on X-Men, Xavier, like, it's Alex. I love names with X's in it. So that's, like, superficially as a poet, like, the sound of it, Latinx, it sounds powerful. It's corny, but I love it. But in terms of, like, resonance, people are allowed to choose how they define themselves. And so if it's not how you define yourself, if you call yourself Latino, Latina, a lot of Latinos just go by their national origin. So they say they're Dominican, they say they're Mexican, they say, and that is a point of pride. But taking a step back, right? Like, I did another interview with this woman named Yadi, and she doesn't subscribe to Latinx at all. Because what she said is that it really is just another form of white supremacy creeping in and trying to distance our Blackness and really trying to just tamper down. Like, we're not Black, we're closer to white, and trying to like get that in there because there's so many folks, particularly from the Caribbean diaspora, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban, right, who are Black. Like, they're Black, and have it, but are quick to say, like, well, I'm not American Black, or I'm not, something else. And they really try to qualify their Blackness, or just qualify it entirely and say, nah, I'm not Black, I'm this. And, I really am interested to think about that, like, the entire rejection of the term, because it's like, it's true. Like, every day, right? Like, growing up, I was like, oh, I'm Puerto Rican. But the world sees me as a Black man. And I knew that I was, like, dark skinned. But like, in, Puerto Rican, oh, you're trigueño, or like, oh, no, you're like negrito. Like, like, they try to, like, again, putting it along the lines, Blackness bad, whiteness good. And you internalize that. And then now when you're in spaces and you're being seen a type of way, it was like, like, at first I was like, oh, I'm not Black. But then I'm like, no, I am Black. And finding power in that. And whether you appear Black and you're Puerto Rican, the African diaspora lives in you because of our culture. Like, it's just,
there's no getting away from that.
Exactly. So I think it's an imperfect term, man. I don't think it doesn't do the job. It's not popular, and it doesn't really holistically include people. But do I think it's a step in a better direction? Yes. And we're getting more precisely there. But implications, right, for Arkansas, for like Arkansanians, what do you call it? Like, Arkansans?
That sounds all right.
People from Arkansas, specifically Latinx folks who are LGBTQ, it is a sad day for them, right? Because they are going to be forced to experience gender dysphoria potentially, right? If they, like, on their birth certificate, it's like, you check this box Latino, but you represent as Latina, right? It's or something else within that broad swath of gender identities. It'll mess you up, and those things do matter, right? How society views you and validates your lived experience is really important. So it's a sad day for those folks, and another group that is organized more so, but like that can definitely use more advocacy is queer people of color. And specifically within that, trans people of color, because of the violence that they're experiencing physically, verbally, institutionally on the day-to-day through their, like, true erasure, right? And this is an example of that. So, I think there's just more work to be done around, like, what to do to find a more precise term that is at once popular, or that resonates with people, and that represents folks who are not in that gender binary in Spanish. So,
I agree with all of that. I think first and foremost, even if you don't subscribe to the term Latinx, I don't think we have to go as far as banning it for anybody else who might, right? Like, we're all getting caught up on semantics right now. And, you know, that's always been part of the agenda of white supremacy, is have us argue amongst each other, because then that just makes us weaker. And that's how they can, again, we were talking about organizing before. Why have the Latin community as a whole been so terrible at, you know, organizing on a grander level? It's because we're all infighting over nonsense that really doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? And you know, this is another thing. Like, you know, if someone were to say, you know, I identify as non-binary, that has no effect on my life whatsoever, right? So why am I offended by you identifying as what you feel comfortable with? If you want to be, you know, labeled as they, if that's your pronoun, it doesn't again have an effect on my life. My quality of life does not go down. I'm not offended by you identifying as they. So this is all nonsense. It's all performance politics. It's a way to kind of mask what the real agenda is. And also the irony of the optics of a white woman telling us what's offensive to our community is just absolutely ridiculous. And again, if I'm an Arkansanian or a person of Arkansas, whatever they actually call themselves, like, you're living in a state that has one of the highest poverty rates in this country. Like, that should be the focus on your first day in office if you're signing executive orders, not this nonsense that is all performance for a white supremacist base at the end of the day. And the last thing I'll say is, because I've heard so many people get like upset about this, like, oh no, I prefer to be Hispanic or Latino or all this stuff. Like, we never called ourselves Hispanic. That was something given to us by the United States of America for the census. You know what I mean? Like, and also, if you leave the United States, people in Latin America aren't referring to themselves as Latino. I'm Costa Rican, I'm Colombian, I'm Puerto Rican, right? This is all something that is just for us as you know, Latinos living in the States, as something that, you know, is meant to kind of lump us all into one category. And to a degree, of course, it unifies us, which we need. But at the same time, it's just meant to erase the sort of very diverse background that we all have from the different places that we, you know, call our homeland, you know, from our ancestry. So to get offended over that and to sit here and act like any of these terms have been done with our best interest in mind, or really actually come from, you know, the horse's mouth, so to speak, our real ancestors, is absolutely ridiculous. You know, I think that's what a lot of people in the Latin community are missing. You're getting so upset about the term Latinx, and you're forgetting that, you know, your ancestors weren't using the word Hispanic either. This is something that was given to us and assigned to us to make us fit into a neater box, you know, for this country.
Yeah,
yeah. Man, it's frustrating, but I'm glad we're getting out there, because I feel like not everybody's going to understand or know this particular history, which is important. Now, last thing I want to quickly touch on is this clown, George Santos, who is a New York congressman, lied about his entire resume completely. We don't even know what the fuck the truth is or where this guy came from, essentially. And now he is, you know, being called for his resignation is being called for by some Republicans in New York. And the irony is, down in Washington, D.C., they're actually assigning him to committees. So they're empowering him even after all of this backlash. So he's going to sit on the House Small Business Committee, as well as the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. And all of these assignments come from the Speaker of the House, from prominent Republicans. And I'm sure anybody who listens to this podcast on a regular basis is tired of me bringing this up, but like, it's a scary fucking day that Republicans don't feel the need to hide any of their nonsense anymore, right? They're literally saying, this guy lied about everything, took advantage of the people who voted for him, and has no credibility whatsoever. And instead of sort of just banishing him from what we do, we're actually going to empower him, because that would be better than admitting that we fucked up somewhere along the way, right? That would be better than admitting to the American people, hey, we messed up. And that's easier than actually having to do something about your mistake, right? Just pretending and performing as if, oh no, everything is fine. And it's just crazy, man. All this is happening out in the open, and nobody seems to give a shit. It seems to not persuade their voters to have any sort of come to Jesus moment. It's really scary.
Yeah, this is what happens when the truth takes a lower priority than like tax breaks, or we're more about like profits over people. Like, you know, and you know, they it's deplorable, absolutely reprehensible, like what the Republican Party has been doing for so many years, like even
Mm-hmm.
before Trump was in office, like George W. Bush, there was a
Yep.
lot of spinning, right, of the whole
Mm.
Iraqi war and
Yep.
everything like that. So
Mm-hmm.
the Republicans have had a fraught relationship with the truth for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're doing is they're not even pretending, like you said, anymore to
Yeah.
like feign that, like they're being very transparent about like how they move as a party
Right.
and what their priorities are.
Right. At least George Bush had the decency to lie to us and pretend like, oh no, we got to stop this now. There's real weapons and real danger. We got to get out there now. These guys are like, I don't even need to fucking justify what we're doing.
We're gonna say 1 week after the Capitol faces an insurrection, and people, your colleagues are literally getting death threats, and they're serious about it. A week later, you're gonna go to that man's house and kiss the ring of King Trump, and then and then fight for your speakership this whole year. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And you know, with George Santos, right? Like, my question is like, how did he make it? Like, apparently, like, his campaign wasn't well run. They, you know, the news media outlets didn't really the larger media outlets didn't pick it up to get the kind of like voter turnout against him, right? And so he just won, and it's like such a fluke, and he lied about everything.
Yeah.
And it's still continuing to lie, but that makes him a perfect fit for the Republican Party.
Right.
And
right.
He's out here, you know, on now these committee seats, because I think from the Republican Party's perspective, if they didn't give him those seats, it would have been seen as like implicit admonishment of his lying. Right. And if you know, at least they're consistent, right? If they're going to condone lying for one of their leaders, they're going to do it for everybody else.
Sure.
So I think for that reason, like, it makes sense why they did that. Do I agree with it? Hell no. Like, it's just, that man needs to go. And what's crazy is his name is George Santos. And it's like, why do we have to have a Latino last name embroiled in this? It's just like it's like the association is just going to blow back against all of us. It's like, you know, when they, I think, I forgot what stand-up comedian is, maybe it's Chris Rock, where he was like, you know, when I see a killer on TV and they're black, I'm like, right. He's white. It's like, whatever. You know, with these politicians, we have so few who represent Latino backgrounds, and to have those Latino last names. Yeah. And now you're there and you're our emissary and you're known as this liar from New York. Right. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I just feel,
And because then it just co-signs other idiots being like, you guys are all wrong. The Republican Party is not racist. Look, George Santos is in power. Look, Ted Cruz is a prominent Republican. Like, you guys have no argument because look at these Latinos, quote unquote, in office. And again, it's performance. They're Latino by name, but they have completely forgotten their culture. They have completely turned their back on their community and taken the fast track to white assimilation, right? And they're being rewarded for it. And that's what a lot of people don't realize when they try to make that argument about, well, they're Latino. And again, to your point, it blows back on the rest of us, right? Because it cheapens our arguments. It cheapens the points that we know are factually true, but then, you know, casts that doubt for anybody who is not as well versed on the things that we're talking about, right? And unfortunately, as people of color, we do bear that burden. You know, white people, when a white person does something wrong, they're an individual doing something wrong, right? Yeah. But sadly, when we have somebody who does something wrong from our community or the black community, to your point, it now represents us as a whole, right? We are all then viewed as criminals. We are all viewed as whatever the fuck it is that's happening in the news. And the scary thing to me, as you bring up the insurrection and then this election, is like, this then begins to set the blueprint for people to do more fuckery, right? Because it's like the insurrectionists aren't really getting held accountable to the degree they should be. And if Donald Trump doesn't get some sort of blowback from it, it just opens the doors for other politicians to do this nonsense. I mean, we saw it in fucking Arizona, you know, with that election over there, where this woman was claiming that, you know, she won the election rightfully, with obviously was completely bogus, but it was a play from Trump's playbook. And then now with this guy, you know, George Santos, it's going to be like, oh shit, like I can make whatever the fuck up I want, and then I get all the clout from being, you know, one of these prominent Republican figures. You know, it's just like what Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert are. They're not real Congress people. They're not real people interested in politics. This is like, for if you are a person who loves, you know, the Republican Party and you are a member of the MAGA cult, this is the greatest thing that could happen to you. You get all that clout, all that fame from just spewing bullshit. And all of these people keep setting a blueprint for more and more nonsense. And when these are the people leading our country, sitting on committees that have an effect on things like small businesses or house science and space, when these idiots don't even believe in science, like this shit has real world applications that could affect each and every one of us. And that's why it's incredibly important for all of us to take note of what's happening and try to avoid the next one from occurring. Now, man, we got into a lot of BS. My blood pressure is a little bit high right now from all these topics. We're going to lighten things up a little bit for our Mi Gente segment. We'll talk about Shakira's diss track on her ex. Mi Gente. All right, so we tackled all the nonsense, the kind of heaviness. This is a lighter kind of pop culture story for our Mi Gente segment. And I thought it'd be interesting because it's not something you hear usually from a female artist, right? I think historically, women have had to sort of be more subtle when they talk about their exes, right? But for men, we can dog, women in our music and this, that, and the third. There's definitely a double standard. So it was really cool to see Shakira do this track, right? And it's informally titled the Bizarre Rap Music Sessions number 53. Presidente did this before, where he had his diss track against J Balvin. Now Shakira has collaborated with Bizarre Rap, and it's her taking aim and telling the story of her split from her boyfriend of 12 years, who's also the father of her two sons, Gerard Piqué, who's also a famous soccer player. And the beauty of this is that in less than 24 hours, it was at 40 million views. Now at this point, it's going even crazier than that.
Wow.
But, she's spewing all kinds of things at him, taking shots at him for, he's a cheater. And also the one thing people were pointing out that they loved her saying was she targets his status as a champion before reminding him in so many words that he isn't anything of the sort. So it's really, I think, empowering, to see a woman do this, and in a world where women are supposed to kind of fit into this neat box of sort of being sexy but not controversial, right? And that if you are talking about sex, then you fall into this, category of being lesser than. Meanwhile, any male artist can, describe sex with any sort of explicitness and it's okay, right? So there's always this double standard. So it is interesting to see her getting this kind of positive sort of reaction and interest from something like this. I mean, the general conversation overall, I mean, what's kind of your take in hearing it?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess the week of the diss track, because Miley Cyrus also released a new song called Flowers.
Yeah,
and
yeah, I saw that.
And she released it on her ex's birthday, Liam Hemsworth. And apparently the song she sampled was from a Bruno Mars song that they dedicated to each other. And like cites lyrics and everything. So shout out to the women for, not holding back and giving their exes the smoke, on these tracks. I think it's again, like as you mentioned, like a traditionally male like artists do this practice where they're able to like throw shade or throw jabs at people. At the end of the day, art is for the artist, right? And it is, while they're pop culture, they're pop artists, right? So inherently, their music needs to be catchy and a little bit formulaic from time to time. Sure. At the end of the day, like, art heals you. And so kudos to her for like laying her shit bare and being vulnerable enough to share it with the public about the issues with this person who clearly hurt her. And putting it out there and for it to be received so overwhelmingly, because you're right. Like a lot of people could have been like, why is she doing that? She has 2 kids, right? Blah, blah, blah. Like, don't air your dirty laundry. Latinos, we like to keep our dirty laundry in the crib, and kudos to her. Like, I think for really putting herself in the driver's seat of her art and sharing a message that was true to her and dragging him. And sometimes, as I've been in my own healing journey, I've been realizing like, I'm a textbook people pleaser, blah, 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 blah. But as I've been, setting my own boundaries, sometimes people need their feelings hurt. You know what I'm saying? And need to be told about themselves, and you just stand up for yourself. So I'm for it. I'm here for it. Shakira, keep doing your thing. And, whenever, wherever. And Yeah, you do. I think it's good. I still haven't heard the song, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
after this go listen to it and see what it's about. See her bars.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to your point, last thing I would say on is, yeah, these are pop artists. You're also mentioning Miley Cyrus. I think it's got to be empowering to express something incredibly real, right? Because I think, of course, you're a pop artist. You have so much success. You're being played on the radio, but as artists, like, there has to be this feeling like you wish you could really express what's on your mind, right? Because for so many of us, when we are in situations where we're trying to heal, we're going through pain, happiness, whatever it might be, our expression is our art. And to have our art stunted because we're trying to sort of walk this fine line of success, I'm sure has to be frustrating for anyone, especially people at that level. So I think it is amazing and empowering. I'm sure for someone like Shakira or Miley, whose name I've been seeing pop up a lot, that when you're being your most raw, you're being your most vulnerable, people are still fucking with you and they're still taking in what you're saying and supporting it, and you're still seeing that success. I think that's any artist out there would that's all we could ever ask for, right? And
it's like it's the biggest thing when I share a poem and people fuck with my shit. Like I'm
yeah,
like, oh, like I'm not crazy enough to think I like this is good. Like that
right.
validation is nice. And also, the writing heals you as the artist, but then the
Mhm.
performance heals other people. There's so
Mm,
many other women who are likely have been screwed over by their men or
yeah.
have fraught relationships and need healing, and to hear themselves in a song like about venting your frustrations against somebody who broke your heart, or about your self-love ballad, like it's important to hear these messages because in our society, women, the route for men is like you work, you make money. Women, you get
Hmm.
married to a man, and
Right.
that is the moniker of like success in this country.
Sure.
And so for them to be subverting that and showing that it's complicated what love really
Hmm.
looks like, I think
Hmm.
is awesome. And it's successful for a reason. Like you said,
Sure.
they're vulnerable,
Yeah.
they're being honest, and people are like fuck with honesty and art. So
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
I love it, man. So let's quickly talk about Nuyorican Poets Cafe, right? This is
Mhm.
a legendary venue, a staple of New York City, a staple of the Puerto Rican community. It's been around, long before you and I were even out here creating anything. And first of all, it's amazing that it's lasted this long throughout sort of the gentrification that we've seen in New York City, specifically when you talk about the Lower East Side and what
Yep.
was Loisaida and all these areas of New York that have become now prominent areas for other people to want to live. But for me, even, as a Puerto Rican, and then I had gotten really into spoken word poetry over the pandemic. And I think that has brought even a greater appreciation for what, Nuyorican Poets Cafe is. So anybody who's not from New York and not familiar with it, I mean, how would you describe the venue itself and also the work that you guys do there?
Oh man. The only thing I could just say the word is magical, right?
Hmm.
Like it really describes my experience. One, being a poet who started performing there just a year ago,
Mm.
to now being on the other side of the wall, right? The curtain,
Sure.
and helping make the magic happen, and
Hmm.
seeing when it all comes together and how special each and every event is, how different it is. It is a hallowed institution. It is a temple to the written word, to the
Mm.
spoken word. And it was founded in 1973, and magic happens there and has been happening. Um, and it was founded by like our founders. Well, there were a number of founders, but
Mm.
the four tent poles, were Miguel Agarin, Pedro Pietri, Miguel Piñero, and oh my God, don't do this to me. This is gonna happen. Tato Laviera. Um,
Okay.
sorry, Tato. But yeah, so it was founded then, and these guys were just regular guys, and
Yeah.
making it through in the Lower East Side throughout New York City, just trying to get by, and found poetry and spoke that.
Hmm.
And so it was literally in Miguel Agarin's mother's one-bedroom apartment where it
Mm.
started. And why people snap
Hmm.
is because when they started meeting there, they would clap and they would get calls from the police, from the neighbors. And so they started snapping to kind of like still show praise for the poem and not get called
Sure.
the cops on and break up the party.
Yeah.
And then from there, they found another space in the Lower East Side, and then they moved into the location in 1976, the current location. So Nuyorican has been around since 1973. It was founded on Halloween night. And, you know, I mean, the legends that have come through it, people that have done amazing things in the entertainment, and like Luis Guzman, there's like old footage that he's there, like back in the original space. Mum, who was on Oz, who was the poet on Oz, like those are just like two that come to mind directly. But people in hip hop, like it has just been a breeding ground of marginalized voices who are looking for a space, weirdos, freaks who were, you know, not really represented in the mainstream. Half of our founders were queer, and there's been a home for people to like share their voice, own their craft, build their audience, experiment, and do all these amazing things. And every single night is something special, something different that we do there. We host open mics on Mondays. We host open slam, so people could come in from off the street and just spit their stuff, get a score, get some feedback from the audience. And then Fridays are invite slam with the champions of the Wednesday, and they come to perform each week. And that one is a spectacular show. It's our most popular show every Friday, sold out. And it's just seeing the different levels of poetry, seeing also just art. We got rappers, we got singers, we got dancers sometimes, a lot of stand-up recently. So it's just like, when you think about like the starving artist life, people just making their start, trying to like, you know, go at it, New York City, people coming in from Texas or Tennessee. It's like, I just moved here last week and I'm here at this open mic trying to make it big. Like you see that at the Nuyorican. It is a really powerful space, and I feel blessed, very blessed to be part of it.
That's so beautiful, man. And on a side note, according to my father, we are related to Miguel Piñero.
Really?
So he's Piñero is a family name on my father's side. His mother's actual last name is Piñero, my grandmother, and according to where he was born in Curabo, Puerto Rico, we have family that is Piñero over there. So it's a very good chance that we are distant cousins of Miguel Piñero, which is crazy to me.
That is really crazy. Well, on his birthday, so what's crazy is I'm born December 20th. His birthday is December 19th. And so I was in the cafe on a Monday night, and it was our open mic, and I was like, oh, I want to spit. Let me whatever. So I put my name on the list, and I got a notification from Instagram, and I had just gotten the access to our Instagram account. And it was a message like, oh, it's Miguel Piñero's birthday. He did this. So I was like, oh, his spirit is speaking to me. So I spit one of his most famous poem, a Lower East Side poem, in honor of him on his birthday. Shout out to Miguel Piñero, amazing poet and theater person. He has a movie with Benjamin Bratt. But that's awesome that you're you know, like family. That's now you got to come back and spit some shit in Nuyorican. Have you been?
I know, man. Yeah, you're putting me on the spot, because I have a bunch of spoken word, and one of my goals is actually to perform at Nuyorican Poets Cafe, and I've been dragging my feet on it because I am a little bit nervous to step on that stage. I just feel like that's such a heavy burden, you know.
I feel you, man. Like I used to I had been like maybe 3 times or 4 times before I performed for the first time. And I had like 3 or 4 times over the span over a decade. And I always wanted to be there more often, but I was afraid to go because I was like, if I go with my friends, they're going to tell me to sign up. And if I sign up, I have to perform. And nothing hurts my heart more than bombing a performance. It is the biggest. So, but you know, like after the pandemic happened, and I lost my cousin late in the pandemic, and those experiences of grief over the life I lived and over the loss of my cousin really put a fire into me. Like, yo, life is too short. What's the worst that's gonna happen? And like when you're in art, and like, you know, I've really tried to take the mindset of progress over perfection. As much as I am a type A person and I like being perfect and, you know, everything going to plan. When you're an artist, you just got to embrace the messiness of it all and just do it. And so, you know, next time in New York, man, hit me up, pull up. You don't even got to pay for a ticket. Like, we'll have you. And it is also just such a warm and welcoming space. People are really supportive of each other and trying to see each other do their best. It's not like a, you know, catty, like, you know, sometimes show business can be like that. It's not like that in the Nuyorican.
Oh man, that's beautiful. I'm definitely gonna take you up on that this year. I will definitely show up to an open mic or something like that. I'm
Yeah,
putting it
love
out
to have
there.
you.
I appreciate it, man. Well, listen, bro, I loved having you on the show. Where can people follow you, keep up with all the great work that you're personally doing, as well as what you're doing with the Nuyorican Poets Cafe?
Yeah, so I'm a Bronx-based poet, repping the Bronx and East Harlem, and so you can follow me at Nicco Diaz, NICCODIAZ.NYC on Instagram. I'm doing a lot of stuff at the cafe every week, obviously, and helping run that. So if folks are interested in renting space, performing, hit me up. You can also follow us at the Nuyorican page at Nuyorican Poets Cafe. Yeah, it's really long, but go to our website, NUYORICAN.org, Nuyorican.org, and you can get all the social media stuff. And lots of amazing things happening. It's the 50th anniversary of the cafe. We're celebrating. And so lots of amazing things that we're trying to do with events and fundraising. So let's stay connected and follow me. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
I appreciate you, my bro. Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Nicco Diaz, for hopping on the show. Really loved hearing his perspective on everything. And man, legendary Nuyorican Poets Cafe. He has officially, man, put me on the spot, set my intention that I will walk on the stage over there and do some poetry at some point this year. I'm holding myself to that. Now, on that topic of things that you want to do, but you are scared, because I am definitely scared as all hell about sharing some of my poetry, I wanted to kind of bring that into our Ask a Gringo segment for today's show.
Ask a Gringo. I have a question.
All right, so for today's Ask a Gringo segment, I simply asked my listeners, and remember, at DJ Dramos on Instagram, you want to be a part of these conversations, but I simply asked, what have you always wanted to do but are too scared? And if you can, why? Now, I got a couple different responses on here. I'm going to try to keep it short because I know that there's man, we kind of went a little bit long on today's show. So I'm going to keep it short and read a couple. First one here, the _Tao_of_Ryan32 says, record my own song top to bottom. And man, that is an incredible goal. And I think what's even more incredible about it is that it's incredibly feasible in today's day and age. You know, you don't need to have a fancy recording studio. You can do these things from the comfort of your own home with some pretty affordable equipment, you know, depending on how serious you are, or if you have a few buddies who have some equipment, record it and put it out there, man, and just, you know, enjoy that experience. No reason to hold back on that. And I guess I'm saying it like it's so easy, but like we're obviously all scared of different things. I'm talking about like being afraid of doing the poetry stuff, and it's as simple as showing up on an open mic night, signing up and doing it. But I guess, you know, you didn't give me too much info, but maybe it's the fear of putting yourself out there, right? Sharing our art and being that vulnerable is incredibly scary because we're leaving ourselves open to judgment, right? The outside world, other people's opinions, and they're inevitably going to come, are kind of, it's a free for all for them to judge us and what we've created. And that's definitely nerve wracking. And I know that that's something that I'm scared of, is like sharing my work and putting my vulnerability out there, especially when you write something and you create your art, you're putting your all into it and you're kind of spilling your guts to a degree. It is, man, it can be a little bit nerve wracking to share that, but like I'm telling myself, I have to do it. And Ryan, I definitely suggest the same thing for you. All right, at Bren J Life Coach in the homie, she was our guest last week. She says, shrooms. I've always been a huge fan of Alice in Wonderland for as long as I can remember. And about a decade ago, I decided I want to try them and give some milestone birthday as, quote, when I'm going to do it, but then never do. I'm scared because all the scary shit parents and family have said about psychedelics. However, I recently listened to more research and studies that are being had, and in correct microdoses, it seems to be really healing and powerful for humans. So I don't know when, but one day, LOL. Man, I have shared the same sentiment. Psychedelics have been something I've been in fear of. I've never been somebody who's even, you know, like been into weed. You know, I drink some beers every once in a while, but that's kind of been the extent of anything that I've done. And I've heard about psychedelics a lot, you know, mushrooms and microdosing and things like that, particularly when it comes to helping people with their mental health. And I will say, sorry, Mom, if you're listening, but under the supervision of some professionals, I did microdose some mushrooms. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I got out of it exactly what I was hoping for. I expected to kind of be led on some long journey, but to be fair, I think doing it definitely opened some wounds that I had been hiding away, or sort of just like some pent up emotion that's been buried deep down inside of me, and it made me incredibly aware of it, you know. And just to be completely transparent, like I've been somebody who never really like cries publicly, you know, at funerals or really traumatic events. You know, it's rare that I'm going to cry, and I would always kind of forcibly hold it back, you know. And it was something I learned as a kid because I didn't want to be judged, or I didn't want to be you know, put on display, or whatever it is, you know, as a little kid. And since then, I've kind of developed this mechanism of always holding my tears back. And there are times where I feel like they're going to come up and they never do. And that's incredibly frustrating because I feel like I can't get this release. And that's kind of what came up for me when I microdosed shrooms, was just this overwhelming sense of sadness. And I wanted to like release it. And it felt like I was finally going to get this relief. Like the tears were going to come. And then I would kind of hit a wall, and my eyes would well up, but the kind of crying that I wanted to just release it all never came. And I still haven't gotten that relief. I haven't had that big crying moment that I feel like where I just sort of let loose of everything. But I guess the experience for me was making myself incredibly aware of the fact that I often hide my emotions, or at least historically have, and I don't allow myself to just feel, and that I have a lot of pent up sadness from different things in my life that I haven't properly dealt with, or just kind of allowed to vacate my body emotionally. So yeah, that was my experience. I don't really have a clear answer as to what that healing looks like that I need, but I guess it did make me keenly aware of something. So there was a positive out of it. But definitely, you know, follow directions of somebody who's done it before, and you know, be careful of where you get it from and things of that nature, as with anything. But I think there are actually even websites now that will supply you with some sort of guided like microdose. I know like LSD is another one that they're working with, if I'm not mistaken. There are certain websites that will have like doctors and trained professionals, like I said, kind of guiding you through it, and making sure that you're, you know, not doing anything crazy and that everything is safe. So if you're into it, look into that kind of stuff. I know I've seen a lot of really great evidence about the positive effects of microdosing, and you know, the way that it can help people sort of deal with depression and heal, as well as things like PTSD and anxiety and all of the above. So definitely interesting stuff. Never something like, and I love how you said your parents would make you scared of it. Same here, you know, the idea of like drugs, even weed. It's like, oh my God. But yeah, I think it's interesting. The science is showing that these things can be incredibly helpful, you know, done in moderation, and, you know, with the right people around. So definitely do your own research. That's kind of my story, if that helps you at all. Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for participating in our Ask a Gringo segment. Again, at DJ Dramos on Instagram. I'm going to be a part of these conversations. And now, man, let's quickly tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for Conclusion Stew.
So I'm going to quickly go through this because we tackled it pretty much, you know, man, really in depth. And I know this episode's running a little bit long, but we'll quickly touch on, man, the Avenue of Puerto Rico sign that was switched out in Brooklyn and then, you know, put back, a quote unquote mistake that happened after the public backlash. It is more of the same, the erasure of our history, and the idea that in these changing, gentrifying areas, any association with that history, specifically here we're talking about Puerto Rican history, but that's considered something that kind of lessens the value of the area to its new tenants. And we have to fight to make sure our voices are heard and that our history is preserved, because, you know, that's something that the next generation is man, not only going to want to see, but needs to see, you know, to remain empowered, to remain inspired. And I know for me, having seen these things and learned about our history, and, you know, and kind of gone deeper than what was taught to me in schools, has been incredibly empowering. And we need to make sure we protect our stories and keep using our voices and come together. Now, you talk about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, signing this executive order to ban the word Latinx. it's just ridiculous. And listen, I understand for a lot of people where they feel like it's this like overly woke word that we're now using and doesn't make sense, doesn't represent them. And that's fine. You don't have to use it. I'm not going to publicly shame anybody for not wanting to use the word. I think it's a choice. But for those people who feel like they're represented or seen in the this terminology, more power to you. It doesn't affect my life. You referring to yourself as a Latinx doesn't bother me. And it's not an offensive term. And again, a lot of people need to learn their history. The words of Hispanic, those were created by the United States, by white people, to find a way to kind of put us in a box on their census, and again, if you go to any Latin American countries or the Caribbean or whatever it is, people aren't saying I'm Latino, I'm this. They're saying I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Costa Rican, I'm Colombian, whatever it is, right? And that's how they identify themselves. These are all sort of things that are meant to kind of throw us all together, lump us all together. And again, on one hand, I think it's great because it gives us a common identity to kind of rally behind in a place where anybody of color is shunned. But at the same time, let's not get too caught up, I feel like, on semantics here on how people want to choose to identify themselves. I don't think it needs to be that big of a deal. And don't get it twisted. This is just performance by the Republican Party. And this is, dog whistling for their base to sort of say we're not standing by anything non-binary. And they're just pretending that they're doing this for the Latin people and that, science shows and research shows them that this is an offensive term. It's nonsense. This is all performance at the end of the day. And then, man, talking about performance, you have George Santos from New York, a congressman who has lied about absolutely everything. He is just performing. The Republican Party as a whole, rather than saying, listen, we need to correct this issue, are more concerned with maintaining their slim power in the House as well as maintaining their PR as this, powerful party, and they can't possibly have any mistakes or anything like that. And to them, it's just, again, it's more of the same, that power, supersedes everything else. Having a Republican person in that seat is more important than anything else, and they're going to reward him even if he lied about absolutely everything and took advantage of the voters. They're still going to reward him with power to sit on particular committees in Congress, which is just ridiculous. But hey, as Republicans have shown us, there's no shame whatsoever in that party. And last thing on our Mi Gente segment, we talked about Shakira's new diss track. And I just think it's a beautiful thing. I love the conversation we got into with Nicco about, the idea that these are like pop artists. He mentioned Miley Cyrus as well. And I think as an artist, it is a beautiful thing to see somebody kind of being incredibly honest and spilling what their truth is and making something real. And in Shakira's, case, it's not a pop song. It's like a battle rap song. And to see that kind of success is incredibly empowering, I'm sure, for them as artists, that they can be this vulnerable and they don't have to create some pop record in order for people to fuck with what they're doing. And I think that that's a great, kind of direction that I feel like the world is moving into a degree. And I think it's just a great moment, again, for women's empowerment, that they can be fully dimensional human beings and express various emotions and not have to be judged in a certain way. We as men are given the freedom to express ourselves in a variety of ways that women aren't. And talk about entertainment and music specifically, there's just this double standard that constantly happens. So you love to see a woman like Shakira taking that power and seeing this much success with it. And man, yeah, that's it. That's it for today's show. I loved all these conversations. I loved the Nuyorican Poets Cafe being sprinkled in here. Man, we have to protect any of these organizations that are doing the work of preserving our history and creating a safe space for the community. So if you are in the New York area, you're visiting, make sure you go support. Go check out a night at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. I'm sure on the website you can donate as well to help fund as they stay alive in gentrifying New York City. And man, that's it. Make sure you go check out the Street Stoke podcast, my second podcast. Every day we upload a new episode Monday through Friday. Short 10 to 15 minute episodes of inspiration. I'm finishing up the final stages of my first book. I'm really excited for that. So be on the lookout. I think February 1st is kind of the date I have in mind to start doing some pre-orders for it. I'm really excited to share some of these writings with you guys and kind of take our connection just a bit further. So, man, that's it. I'll catch y'all on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.